let's play this performance first. And I think you actually wrote a paper on this.
That's right.
Baby, got me, got me so hype like, got me so high like dopamine, baby, got me floating, floating so high like dopamine. Connection set fires and capsules and we boom boom drink on yeah credit go move both like bolt air I can't be credit so play great bad go for me but don't cry look into crash so clean can't be low in best come and get it with this we can spend up we can get and crack this with our heads in the clouds why can't you see? You are like a midnight scrum much dream. Calling you buttons, we cry like days. Come and play with me. Let's see what the sky turns clean to pure green. All up think, fine up think, fine up think. With my head on the ground, put my feet in the sky. My oh my, pure green. All up think, fine up think, fine up think. With my head on the ground, put my feet in the sky. My oh my, baby. Got me so hype like, got me so high like dopamine, baby. Got me floating, floating so high like dopamine.
Yeah. So you wrote a paper on this.
Yeah. So I met beatboxers who knew that I studied I feel like I need to say my story briefly before I get to the paper, just because I'm not a beatboxer, though I've learned a little bit as I've gone along. I got approached by a beatboxer when I was a grad student at USC, and she wanted to analyze beatboxing articulation, the movements of the lips and the tongue, and things. We had MRI videos, which I forget if we talked about them last time.
We discussed them. It's worth going over again because, I mean, that's an undertaking in and of itself. They're not easy to get access to. You have to have university approval. They're not exactly, they don't trust everyone with those.
No.
They're expensive, they tend to be.
But they're free. Like the result is free for everybody to see, and we can put the link up at some point. And
I plan to. We'll be going over the footage extensively.
No,
yeah.
Great. But like that's where I started looking at all this. And then at some point I had an opportunity to start asking my own questions about beatboxing and do a little bit more digging in different directions. And so I'm a linguist by training. I have a PhD in linguistics, though my parents tell people I have a PhD in beatboxing, which I think is also kind of fun.
It is what I generally tell people. So but real quick. So what is linguistics? Because
sure. Yeah, great. So linguistics is the study of language, and more than that, it really depends who you ask. In fact, within the field of linguistics, there's a whole bunch of people doing a whole bunch of things. And because it's a community of people, we don't always agree about which things are the most important, and that's okay. And because there's so many people doing so many things, there's also a lot of people tying into like other parts of science and the natural and social world. So So a lot of people might characterize linguistics as having to do with the structure of language. That is to say, for spoken and sign languages, the smallest pieces of movement, or for speech, also for sound, that contribute to meaning, studying those, as well as the syntax, the arrangements of words and signs in an utterance. So like as we're talking right now, the order in which I say things has a lot of hidden structure beneath it. So the people who study that kind of thing, the meanings of words, the pragmatics behind conversations and the way people write about things. There's the social side, and for a lot of people, the social side is all of it. Like everything is social, all the structure that I just talked about. So you might have people who are studying how the way you pronounce a word, or the way you pick words for a sentence, or the way you sign something, or the way you sign the signs you pick for a conversation, are affected by your identity. And so this comes through in accents and dialects, and there's a whole like chunk of YouTube that you can go off and explore to learn all about those kinds of things.
But
There's a
you in particular, so this is not
Yeah,
when your work in particular, because we are talking, we discussed MRI footage.
sure.
So the sociology and the social sciences
Yeah.
obviously have implications here, but they're not
Yeah.
what it is that you do with linguistics.
They're not my traditional focus, except that uh, it's kind of important to keep in mind the people that you're working with and talking about and writing about as you do everything. Otherwise, um, it can get a little easy in science to dehumanize people,
Okay.
or like to say, well, we're just talking about like this one thing that you do, and we don't care about how you came to be doing this as a person. Where there's something to like the story of the person that tells you important information about them. For example, Kayla Milady, who performed that piece, had been beat rhyming for 2 years when she did that.
Okay, so
Uh,
beat rhyming for those who don't know,
yep.
because this is one thing that I'm excited to get into.
Yeah,
The
great.
beatboxing community has a definition for everything. And
Uh-huh.
there's always that tedious debate. Is it vibration bass or is it poly chest voice? Like, and what you do that I think would be such a boon if people would tune in to what you have to say is that you can take these ideas as a linguist and model them in such a way that everything is a little bit more succinct. There's obviously still a whole world of sound that we
Yeah.
don't entirely understand, which is what is kind of exciting about beatboxing. Yeah, but like, instead of giving everything an individual name, we can start to say, this is what's happening. And then they're using this as a filter. And so we can talk about how things are created and give definitions accordingly. And that's a lot of work. It's not a complete work by any stretch,
No.
but that is what you're writing about. And I looked at your article. You have IPA listed. You really get into it. So I'll let you
It's
do that. But
yeah, it's about getting into the details and getting really specific.
yeah,
And so I wanna emphasize that like, so the paper that we're going to talk about is one that has me listed as an author. The second, we're going to look at it, but there's three people who were authors on that paper, and one of them is Kayla Milady, who did the performance. And in talking with her about the performance, I learned a lot about like her background as a beat rhymer and her perspective on what she's doing when she's beat rhyming, and that informed a lot about how we conceived of beat rhyming, or if there were things that we sort of had to leave on the cutting room floor, it informs how we're going to think about beat rhyming for future papers. And having that conversation with Kayla is something that is like a really important part of especially for a linguist, the scientific process, to make sure that we know what are the people doing when they're doing these things that we, the scientists, are going to study.
mhm.
So like, I just want to emphasize that sort of social element might not be the key focus, but it's hidden there, but it's there. It's the knowing it's there. Like the people involved in the scientific process, it's an enterprise of people. People who are writing things, who are reviewing things, who are giving funding, who are taking money. It's all people, and regular people, social patterns apply.
Okay.
So I don't know. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about as we look at this thing. Can I share maybe like the screen of the paper? Like can I share
Absolutely.
and
Yeah,
walk
yeah,
through?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Let me multiple participants.
So
Sure. There you go.
so okay, my deal is
I
that
like
after oh what?
I can also I can put it up as
Let me
well.
see. Because
Whatever's
I
easier.
wanted to just try real quick. I want to share the way to find it for people.
Absolutely.
So I'm a teacher. And so one of the things I like to teach is how to find more beatboxing science if you want to find more beatboxing science.
This
And
is
hopefully you
awesome.
and I will talk. Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully you and I will talk more about this, but it's straightforward. You go to scholar.google.com in your
And
browser.
I want to answer Vladimir. So, a person
Yeah.
trained in vocalization can pick apart the various beatbox sounds. No, not quite. I mean, we're getting into it, and this is actually what to segue right into what you were doing, Dr. Blaylock.
Yeah.
Is that there's a lot involved in what beatboxers do, which is part of the exciting bit, Vlad. So, Dr. Blaylock is going to show us when we want to learn more about the specifics of beatboxing and where the science is. This is the process that we go through.
That's right. And I want to say, I trust a beatboxer's ear way more than my own, because
Yeah, same.
beatboxers actually, I mean,
Because they
that's
actually
like
do it. They do
they
it.
actually do it.
Yeah.
So
And the
like,
human brain is incredible.
if you're a beatboxer and you tell me that this is the way this is the sound that you hear and is different from this other sound, I believe you 100%. And part of the science that we could all do together is to test how reliable that is. Is your ear like the same as 100 other people's ears? And do we all perceive sounds the same way as beatboxers or as scientists? So
I was going to make a joke and I would say, how much do you source Reddit for this? But
I've seen that there's some disagreements sometimes.
yeah, I mean, that's
So
language though, in a way, but
and it is. So if I go to, there's other ways to find research here, but I like Google Scholar. It's free, it's easy, scholar.google.com. And you can type in like whatever you want. You can type in beatbox, you can type in inward bass, you can type in like whatever you want for a specific sound. There's not that much beatboxing research out there.
I
And
noticed.
since I know what I'm looking for, I'm going to type in just my own name, because you can also look for people. So I type in Reed Blaylock, and this like shows up. I actually have my own little Google Scholar profile page,
Nice.
because once you're an academic, you can just do that. It says I'm cited by 100 people. That seems like a stretch. And I'm going to click on this first link here, Speech and Beatboxing, Cooperate and Compromise in Beat Rhyming, because this is the paper that I want to talk about.
Okay.
I'm going to go to the website where the paper is hosted, but you can also just get a PDF if you want to read it like offline on your phone or something, or like that. You have options when you get these things. But when you click on the link, it takes you to the article, and then you've found the science. So thinking about the people, can I go on? Should we pause?
I mean, I'm going to let you cook.
Okay, all right.
Which was
So,
how the kids say, "Go on."
I I was at the American Dialect Society's Word of the Year nominations earlier this year. Cook was there. There was to cook, and there was also you're cooked, and it's fun that they mean such different things.
Yeah.
So this is the paper, and there's a lot of like kind of important information that you can use when you're looking at a scientific article. It's put front and center, and it tells you a lot of things about the article. So you can see, for example, that it's on this website, Frontiers. Frontiers is a company that publishes papers online. They have a lot of different subsections. This one is Frontiers in Communication. You can go see a lot of other sections and see what other kinds of research might be out there. It was published right at the end of 2023. But if you go, Sometimes it'll tell you, maybe not here, but other places it'll tell you when the paper was submitted. So I think on a separate, like if you get the PDF, it'll tell you I submitted it like in June or July or something. And it takes about 6 months for some journals, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, for people to assess whether the science that you did and that you wrote is appropriate for the venue that you're trying to publish it in.
So everything on Google Scholar, what you're saying is peer reviewed.
No, not at
It's
all.
not. Okay.
No.
But on Frontiers it is in this particular instance.
Frontiers is a journal that does mostly, I don't know all of Frontiers in communication, and when it's an original research article like this, it's peer reviewed for sure. And you can tell because on the right-hand side here, it says reviewed by,
Gotcha.
and then it gives the names of the 3 different people that it was reviewed by.
Now, I do want to get into the importance of peer review.
Yeah.
Obviously, the fact that it's peer reviewed doesn't mean that it's instantly great. The fact that it's not peer reviewed, it could just not be peer reviewed yet. But,
that's right.
You know, we hear a lot about peer review. So, I just, if you could speak briefly on how important that is. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's me.
What's that?
I'm just going to pause.
I'm going to put my dog on the bed because he's growling and he's a little baby. So while you do that.
Well, I think that might have been me.
What's that?
I don't know. Was that me?
I mean, I'm good on my end. I hear you loud and clear.
It happens to me every now and then.
Gotcha. I'm going to put my dog on the bed real quick.
Oh, sure.
Because he's grouchy.
Yeah.
He's going to bark. Spoil that. All right, dog. All right. Okay.
Sorry about that. So yeah, peer review. It's the process where people read usually other scientists' work and then give feedback on it. And ultimately, like your peers, your scientific peers, are responsible for telling you whether the science that you did is of a reasonable quality. Different journals accept different qualities of science. The journal Nature is like well known for having very high quality science usually for their original research articles. Within different fields like linguistics has a journal called Language, which accepts, it has peer-reviewed articles, and there's like other genres and subdivisions. There's journals for phonetics, which is the physics of sounds, and for phonology and for other subfields. So there's lots and lots of journals out there, and they all have editors who like receive papers and give initial thoughts on papers maybe, or let you know whether your paper is a good fit for the journal in the first place. And the editors will go out and find people to do the peer review of your paper. The people doing the peer review, your peers, usually don't get paid to do the peer review. It's a volunteer thing. You're electing to participate in the community of scientists to help cultivate a community of good science, and make sure that the work that's getting put out there is of relatively strong quality.
You're using the word good and words like quality a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to have bad science.
Yes.
And it's not as easy as one might think. There's a reason why. So it's this happens a lot, and I as much as I try, I'm very fallible on getting the right information, sourcing the right information, and saying the things that are true. And this is very, very much a problem in singing education, and of course, because beatboxing at this scale and of this styling has been so explosive and rapid, and the developments of the sounds and all that. So how do you, where can things go wrong, and how do you spot them briefly? I know that this could be a real rabbit hole.
I mean, it is, you're asking me to go down a huge rabbit hole, and the way that science can go wrong is not my specialty. Like that's a whole, like, people get PhDs about how science can go wrong. There's like it's a real major field of study, or I should say, what I mean is there are lots of ways, and some of them are big and some of them are small. And it changes according to the scientific paradigm, and it changes according to the age that we live in. Science is evolving over time, and so what counts as good science or high quality science also changes as we move along. I could tell you, for example, that these days, if I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a PhD, so I don't want to talk about a medical example. If I were to do a study in linguistics about language, like some language variety, some way that people speak in a certain community in a certain part of the world, I would probably get some pushback from a peer reviewer if I only studied men or if I only studied women, and just unless I had a really good reason for doing that, if I wasn't looking at a we might say heterogeneous group of people, making sure that I'm looking at enough different kinds of people to see if the conclusions I'm drawing about this community are strong. Because maybe, I mean, we know that sometimes people talk differently from each other by sex or by gender or by race or by how you're trying to project identity.
Let me
These like
let me
these,
draw it in a little bit because
oh yeah,
I get what you're
draw me
saying.
in.
My question really was
Oh yeah, let's.
how can the beatbox community be better about acquiring
I see.
information
Yeah,
and identifying red flags and being better about talking it? I think you do
yeah,
raise a
that is
legitimate
better.
point.
That's a better
Being
question.
being
Yeah.
gender inclusive is certainly a factor, and I think
So there's all kinds of things to look out for. You want to look at who's doing the science. It's better if it looks like they have actually done the science in collaboration with community members, because it means that the beatboxing, like the science is informed by the beatboxing. That's helpful because then you know a beatboxer's voice was there in the process and the scientist isn't just like going off on their own, doing their own thing, whatever, without really understanding beatboxing.
And you
Then,
said last time we talked that
oh,
one of the sorry, my
wow.
levels went up probably.
No, I'm impressed that you have a transcript from last time.
Oh, I just remember the interview.
Oh, okay, all right.
But and I do have a transcript as well, but I just remember the interview. You said last time that one of the things that you were looking for were participants. Obviously, since then, your situation has changed. I think you're doing ASL a little bit more.
That's right.
But how can if it's if identifying the quality of the science of
Mhm.
beatboxing, it's paramount that the community is involved. How do you get more involved? Is there a way? Is there like a portal, a Google Doc, perhaps?
There's not a Google Doc that I know of. Um,
No Google Forms. Okay,
TBD on that.
gotcha.
I would like to come back to that another time.
Absolutely.
Um, there are there are ways. But in general, there's like a problem where having people who want to have their thing that they do studied and the academics who want to study that kind of thing, it can be weirdly hard to connect sometimes.
Hmm.
So it's not just a problem for beatboxing, it can be a problem in other fields too.
Sure.
But like reaching out and getting in contact with each other, me contacting beatboxers, beatboxers contacting me or the other beatboxing scientists out there or other scientists. I think I did say this last time. That's one way, like just ask, you know, hey, is there
Mhm.
room for this? But I think this brings us to another point. One way that you can identify the or that you can like sort of get a sense of where the science is, maybe get a sense of the quality. Like there's no guarantee that just because something was peer reviewed means it's going to be good quality. There's no guarantees anywhere, but you might look for whether that research was funded by an NSF or an NIH grant, or like what the funding for the research was, because money is very important in science.
Yes.
And if you look down like if we go down to the bottom of this article, what we see is that we have all this like stuff here. There's a conclusion of the paper. We talk about where the data is. We talk about that there's an ethics statement, there's author contributions and acknowledgements, a conflict of interest, a publisher's note, supplementary material, footnotes. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in here. And usually somewhere in here, there's a statement about grant funding. Who gave you the money to do this? Who said, hey, this is a good enough idea, what you're proposing to do, that we're going to throw some money at this. The National Science Foundation or other like big scientific pots of money. There's no grant funding here because I did this without grant funding. But you might find that some articles do have that kind of grant funding, and knowing more about the grant issuing organizations, their different levels of prestige, can also be a clue as to, like, it can be a cue for you when you're evaluating the science that you're trying to look at.
So I want to pause here because someone has entered the chat. No meme actually there. Vocoda, we actually checked him out last time we talked. And he's in the chat. And last time we did the interview, there were people who also, hi Vocoda, what's up? There were people who watched, and one of my fantasies.
You, right?
Well, they were there. There were people who watched, but like there were people of in large figureheads in the community, Vocoda being one of them. Actually, Vocoda reached out to me and was like, how can I get my base studied? And I was like, what do I know? So, but one of my fantasies is that as an online community, because there is a lot of coordination, there is a lot of interest in this. Is there a way? So the funding is such an obstacle.
Yes. And
yeah.
you need to be able to sell the story of why you want funding for this project.
Yeah. And like, I don't imagine GBB clips are going to do that, as awesome as they are. Is there a way that bigger people with a larger reach can command a sort of funding or help in any way in that sense?
Probably.
I imagine there's something. This is probably a conversation that requires a lot of advanced forethought, but it is something that's been on my mind because getting, like we said, getting access to an MRI machine is not cheap.
Well, so one thing I can show today is a different kind of analysis than with an MRI machine. And it's something that anybody can do to do some science. Right. So we've talked about a few things, and I've rambled about a couple things already, but there is like some easy at-home science you can do of just exploring your voice and using scientific instruments to understand how it works. From there, it can be easier to find questions to ask, to collect data, or to learn how to do the kinds of data analysis that scientists might be interested in.
Okay.
What I mean is, I can show you the big instrument that a scientist uses.
Sorry, 1 moment. Sorry. That was my alarm to have an interview. Rip.
Sure.
I cut you off briefly. Yeah, no, there's folks asking stuff in the chat.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I know we're taking the there's we'll get to these questions at the end is what I'll do, so that I can let you do what you do.
I'm gonna
please continue.
I'm gonna put the thing back up. And I just wanna call attention again, because we're talking about like how to look for the science. And so we've talked a bit about peer review, and as you said, just because an article isn't peer reviewed doesn't mean it's not good, but it does mean it does help. It's one thing to look for. So another thing that you can do when you're looking at a scientific article is to read the abstract. The abstract of an article is the paragraph or a couple paragraphs that comes at the very beginning, which is the scientists writing for other scientists, because it's all written for a scientific audience, usually, or another academic audience, usually. And it's us trying to summarize as best we can what we did and why we did it. So I'm going to read out loud the abstract of this paper. I'm not going to read the whole paper, but just the little bit of the beginning, just to get a sense for what this sounds like in my own voice. Beat rhyming, which is what we're going to be talking about, is a type of multivocalism in which an individual beatboxes and speaks, that is, sings or raps, at the same time, by interweaving beatboxing sounds and speech sounds within words and phrases. The measurements in this case study of a beatboxing performance focus on one-to-one sound replacements, I put that in quotes, in which a beatboxing sound is integrated into a word by taking the place of a speech sound. All right, that's 2 sentences in, and there's already a lot to unpack.
Yes, this is academic reading at its finest.
Yes.
It's like Melville, but, you know, more
Right.
pragmatic.
But worse.
Yeah.
Definitely, I am not a trained author. Like, I've been writing for a lot, and I learned how to write in school, and I learned how to write in grad school, and I'm still learning how to write, and not everybody's good at it. And I'm not saying I'm one of the people who's good. So
well, it's just inherently dense. I'm not being hypercritical of you or anything.
It definitely
like that.
can be.
Yeah.
And then there's also like ranges of quality of writing too. It's a whole thing. So in the first sentence here, I'm stating for scientists something that a lot of beatboxers might already know, which is what is beat rhyming. And I describe it as a type of multivocalism that is doing 2 kinds of vocal things. Here, beatboxing and speaking is like singing or rapping. And then I focus on, I use the word interweaving here. Interweaving, like putting beatboxing sounds and speech sounds together so that the beatboxing sounds are within words and phrases. Then I narrow down. We're going to focus on a specific kind of thing that happens in beat rhyming, which we're going to call replacements, but replacements maybe isn't the best way to talk about that, where a beatboxing sound goes into a word by taking the place of a speech sound. You played Kayla Melody's Dopamine earlier. The first word she says is baby, where the b and b of baby get replaced by kick drums. A-B.
So we have
a
the
first one. They're a little firmer in the second.
So yeah, like a voice consonant versus an unvoiced. So you're taking. Well, I guess it doesn't have to be a consonant because there's so many options. Like
there's a lot of options,
kind of thing,
but like this is the thing. In this paper, we're going to find out how, at least in this one performance, in this case study, how she did that. Hold on a second, because there's some noise behind me. I don't know if you can hear that very well.
I can't. Zoom is doing a wonderful job.
Oh, great. Well, thanks, Zoom. You let me know if it gets bad.
Vocoder mentioned matching phonetics is another way to put
sure.
it.
Matching phonetics. That's one way we could talk about it. So we're going to get specific, and we're going to use the scientific terminology. We're going to focus the analysis in 2 parts. First, a count of how many times beatboxing sounds used in place of speech sounds matched the intended speech sounds for vocal tract constrictor and constriction degree. Those are terms that are like very specific to a particular branch within phonetics. Some people might say place of articulation and manner of articulation. Those would also be linguistics terms. What we're talking about basically is where in the mouth does the sound happen and what kind of closure is happening in the mouth when that thing happens. So that is to say, the difference between a t and a s in speech, there's a few differences, but in a simple way, we could say that a t has really firm closure between the tongue tip and the alveolar ridge on the roof of the mouth, t, and a s has looser closure, which allows air to come through. That would be the difference between those 2 closures would be constriction degree. The constriction,
You're getting a little bit of the bleed in on the audio.
Wait, say again.
You're getting a little bit of a bleed in on the audio. It's almost like there's like a horn going on in the back.
Oh yeah, that would be the noise behind me.
Can you get closer to your mic by chance?
How's this? Is this better?
Hmm.
No.
Not quite.
Let
Is
me
it
let
like a
me
vacuum?
no, it's a lawnmower.
Oh,
Uh
gotcha.
yeah.
Okay. So
So I
just
don't
at the
have
right
control.
frequency.
Let me move to a different location. Hold on a second.
Gotcha.
I'm just gonna
And then let's see. I'll get to chat here. Same. They always say whistle's bad for your voice. I don't really think it is if you're doing it right. For example, fast inward drags are dangerous. Codfish passed out standing up, but deep, slow circular breathing is healthy. Dilo split his uvula doing snort bass. Is that pressure or is that sound issue? I'm going to take a crack at it, vocoder, on the basis that the vocal folds also can get damaged. Just, you can get a hemorrhage. Split is wild. I've never heard of that. But I would imagine that that is an issue of pressure. I don't know, I don't know what the term is, like the tensile strength of a uvula is probably not that large. It's not a large piece of flesh. So the force generated from the force generated not just of the air, but I imagine if like the tongue might, like if it hits the tongue at a certain speed. So the question, I guess, would then be, at what point does someone's UV, like what's the force that, at what point does the force create damage for the uvula? And that would depend on the person, because everyone's got a different size, right? I imagine the larger, the more it can take, but I don't know. You having fun with your bone there, Blitz?
I've never thought about that before. I don't know. I have no idea myself. I'm back and now I'm just saying that's
Gotcha.
I never thought about the uvula possibly splitting. That sounds
Blitz, I
Yeah.
gave you the bones so you would leave me alone. Give me 1 second. Yeah. Go. I have a like 8-month-old puppy, so he's it's like having a kid, except not at all that difficult. Anyway, okay. Sorry, Dr. Blaylock, continue.
yeah. And you can hear me better now, right?
Absolutely. Yep. You're fine.
Great. Okay, good. Sorry about that before.
Mhm.
So there's going to be, I'm going to count stuff basically. That's what the paper says. First, it's going to be a count of how many times beatboxing sounds, which sort of replace speech sounds in the sense of replacement isn't necessarily the best way to talk about it, but that's how we're talking about it here. Just how many times they do that in a way where I think the phonetics match basically is what the vocoder who said that? Somebody said that.
Yeah, vocoder did.
Right. So yes, and we're gonna say that specifically as vocal tract constrictor, which is it the lips or the tongue tip or the tongue body in the back? Which of those three things is which of the three ways is the beatboxing sound being made? And we don't say it here in the abstract, but we're talking about kick drums and closed hi-hats and outward K snares. For the most part. There's a couple PF snares in there too. And there's
There were some inhale K snares, yeah, as well. Or what? Did I misread that?
Kayla said that they were pretty much all outward K snares.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I trust the beatboxer.
Of course, yeah.
Yep.
I trust the person who made the routine.
Exactly. So at least that's my recollection of the conversation. So I'm going to skip the second part because it's just a lot and it's much more complicated to like describe, even though it's fine. So the science here is counting things and then talking about why counting things was important and what do we get from counting things. Despite having disparate aims, the speech and beatboxing systems work together to create a well-organized behavior. That's the like sort of conclusion we draw from this. Speech tasks, like the goal of speech includes communicating a linguistic message, specifically here of the lyrics. Those speech tasks are achieved in beat rhyming by replacing some speech sounds with beatboxing sounds that match the speech segment in vocal tract constrictor and manner constriction degree. Basically, the phonetics match. Beatboxing tasks, like establishing a musical rhythm, are achieved through using case snares on the backbeat. We're talking about two different systems, speech and beatboxing, which are just like you do different things with them. You don't usually use beatboxing to have a conversation. I don't. Maybe some beatboxers do. It sounds like it would be hard to me.
Oh, battles are almost this inherently social dynamic.
That's true. Yes, absolutely. Then, and there's something to that. But you won't be able, the linguist would claim, it's a hypothesis, that you won't be able to have the kind of conversation with beatboxing that you would have with language, where you can lie, you can discuss the future, you can talk about things that don't exist in the room. It's not like an emotional back and forth. You can actually talk about very specific things.
Can I tell you, I can't wait for the Real Housewives of Beatboxers. Just on all in beatboxing. I don't know what it's going to be like, but it's going to be my favorite show ever.
I would watch that.
I watch
Definitely. So despite the fact that speech and beatboxing like want different things, in beat rhyming, they come together and each of them is partially satisfied. There's a goal of communicating lyrics, and that's helped by doing beatboxing sounds that sound kind of like the speech sounds that they're replacing. So instead of like for the word baby again, instead of doing K snares where those buzz were, you do kick drums where the buzz were. And a kick drum is made with the lips, just like the buzz sound in baby is made with the lips. And the fact that you use the lips for a beatboxing sound, like a labial kick drum sound, to replace a labial speech sound reliably, and the fact that Kayla does this in this pattern at least, tells us that when she is beat rhyming, she is maximizing the chance of the listener to understand the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, fundamentally. I think there is something inherently intuitive about it. I mean, you have a voice consonant in b, and you have an unvoiced consonant in p, and p is how you make a beat, is how you make a kick. It's just that it's a very distinct and refined p. It's, you know, we could go into the transients or whatever, like it, but yeah, no, I think it makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think if we listen to beatboxing often enough, you hear people do it, like Butterscotch does it all the time. And yeah, you can identify the concept. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, great. So I'm just going to finish going through. Achieving both these aims in the same performance requires flexibility and compromise between speech and beatboxing systems, which is my way of saying, hey, beatboxing and speech like connect somehow, some way in your brain, your body, whatever. These two things are meshed in beat rhyming in a way that maybe we didn't expect they would be able to be. Or if they can connect somehow, and if a good beat rhymer can just like beat rhyme on the fly, and I'm pretty sure they can.
Yeah, I try to do it, but I haven't practiced the concept enough, and I don't think I have a vocabulary of sounds, nor if I practice the concept. Yeah.
Nor will I try.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, I try alone in the shower.
Oh, sure, yeah. That's where we do our best work.
Yeah, right.
But like if a beat rhymer is going to do that, then that means they've got like some skill where they are bringing together speech and beatboxing into one thing, and the speech stuff, all the stuff inside a person's head about speech and the beatboxing stuff, whatever you keep inside your head about beatboxing, are coming together in this really special way. And that is a cool scientific insight. Didn't know that was possible. And like, you know, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? Well, the article doesn't go into that, but like just to say that it happens, to make the observation that beat rhyming exists and does this, is a contribution to the scientific literature. And so in the end, we say, in addition to providing the first scientific description and analysis of beat rhyming, which is basically true, it's also one of only 2 scientific descriptions and analyses of beat rhyming in existence. And the other one was another paper that I wrote with a couple of beatboxers from International Christian University in Tokyo, like the year before this, a little conference paper, which is also very interesting. Like that's it. That's all that's been written about beat rhyming ever in academic literature, as far as I can tell. So that's the contribution number 1. And then number 2, the article suggests some ideas about the linguistic theory. What does it mean for linguists and our understanding of language if some aspect of language can get intrinsically tied up with beatboxing, which really doesn't, from a linguist perspective, have anything to do with language. So
Okay.
here we've got like the sort of, hey, isn't that cool? And also the I'm writing for a linguistics audience or a speech science audience. Why should somebody who cares about language care about beatboxing? I claim that if you read this paper, you're going to find some good reasons.
Okay. Let's get
Yeah.
into then to kind of articulate. There were a lot of sounds that she used. So
Yeah.
in the interest of having like a pragmatic takeaway that a beatboxer can use as a tool. Right. Yeah, I was hoping you'd get to the table. Yeah.
So Kaylee used a lot of sounds in her beat rhyming, but there's sections that are beat rhymed and sections that are beatboxed, I would say. Like we could say that the whole performance was a beat rhyming performance, but if we're gonna get scientific about it and be able to focus narrowly on specific sections, we could say that there are only some places where she put beatboxing sounds and words together, and other places there was just beatboxing sounds without words. So I'm gonna focus on the beat rhyming stuff, which was the beatboxing sounds and the words together, and in those places, she only ever used these 5 sounds.
Now, one thing that I did notice is that there were instances where some stuff was kind of adjacent to vowels, right? Because we're right now we have consonants, and
Right now we have beatboxing sounds.
right, as and all of them are as they would have been replaced by when they do replace, they're replacing consonants.
In most of the time, yes.
Most of the time, okay.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to me because now we have an instance where, and maybe I'm sort of begging the question you were already gonna answer.
No, it's good. Let's go.
The difficulty, the challenge is vowels primarily, and how you go from singing and keeping on time and on beat while being able. If you have a like kick snare, kick snare, kick snare, that is so prohibitive lyrically. It is no coincidence that most beatboxing songs repeat a certain theme, like "Baby Got Back." Now that's a terrible example, but "Baby Back," like you can kind of make sense of that, but it takes a lot of work. But
so you're sort of bringing up 2 different pieces here. One is how did the beatbox, like, do beatboxing sounds replace vowels, given that like there's a lot of rhythmic constraints. Like to beatbox well, you've got to get certain aspects of your beatboxing rhythm reliable and repeated. Is that fair? Is that like what you're saying?
There are many challenges.
Yes.
And so yeah, it's actually, this is what I think I cut you off while you were getting into it, which is you have a chart of here's dopamine, here's the word, here's where vowels are, here's where consonants are, and here's what she did.
That's right. And in it we can see that so there's a lot we could talk about what's here. I'm going to do it really briefly. On top, it's what's called a waveform.
And
the
then
next
spectrogram, right?
Next chunk down, that's right, is a spectrogram. And then we annotated, this is like human, I and the second author, Prim Fulsombat, we annotated Kayla's performance in a tool that I can show you in a second. It's called Prot, which is for linguists to annotate acoustics. And so we looked at, we used like our training to look at the spectrogram and the waveform and to chunk it up into pieces. It's called segmentation, to segment according to where the different sounds of the words were. I'm going to throw an asterisk up here, which is that in speech, there's a lot of overlap. Like vowels and consonants don't actually happen one after another in an easy sequence. There's a lot of overlap happening inside your mouth, which is very interesting and something that probably would be very interesting to study in beatboxing too. But we're gonna pretend for the moment
That
that
there
you
are no
can.
diphthongs.
Well, diphthongs, like, we can pretend that diphthongs are a sequence as well, but like, what I'm saying is when you say the word dopamine, the D comes out first, you would think, followed by the O.
Yeah.
But in reality, often the tongue body, which is making the O, is already moving toward its destination when the tongue tip for the D is happening. So the D and the O, like inside the mouth, are co-occurring to some extent.
Right, which
Um,
inherently changes the sound. Yeah.
which changes the sound a lot, and it becomes a huge question about like how do we perceive these kinds of things? Is it useful? Is it prohibitive? Like how does speech work? Big questions, still ongoing. The research is a lot of fun, but that's not what we're talking about. But I just want to make sure that like we know that we're making an assumption here. I want to lay out some of the scientific assumptions, and one of them is that it's possible to just say, here's the duh, here's the o, here's the p, here's the here's the e, here's the n in dopamine. And we label them here according to the International Phonetic Alphabet, d, o, p, that's a schwa, it's an
Mhm.
upside down e, it's called a schwa, e, n. And here, where we expect the d to be, we get a closed hi-hat. Where we expect the p to be, we get a kick drum. And then we get like a smidge of the E vowel here, and then most of the time that could have been devoted to the E vowel is taken up with an outward K snare.
The
That's what this shows.
the 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 level of coordination. I know there's I take a lot of asides. I know this, but it's part of my admiration of beatboxing to just and as like one of the challenges of singing and beatboxing together is this is the if you do E, for example, with vibrato, like I would as an opera singer, throwing a K in front of that is really like slowing. It slows me down because there's a lot of movement that goes on. It's like I can't go fast. If I go eek, like the larynx will pop up and then I have to bring it back down to get that tone. Like it's like gymnastics. So I noticed that she was singing quite lightly. And I'm wondering if we could go to that moment and hear it out, or we can even look at the waveform when because it's tied in the timing, right?
Let me. It is. Let me go to.
Because it looked
Let me
on
take
the
this up.
waveform, it almost like she stopped the E, which makes sense because the heel of your tongue would have to, and you'd have to stop your vocal folds from phonating.
Let me go to the actual data here. So I'm going to share my screen again, but this time, make sure, yeah.
Because this is something like I wanted to almost give like free lessons to beatboxers so that I can understand this better. Oh, this is so beautiful. I don't know what about just oh man, this makes my heart
Okay,
warm.
so this is the same thing as before, except that it's like an older version of what we looked at, and so it's not the nice pretty one that we saw before. this is a slightly older version of what we were just seeing.
It's a little bit more
Um,
information dense though, which was useful, I think. Yeah.
Yes. So there's two waveforms up here because we're showing in stereo, but really that doesn't matter. Like
Yeah, it's just a mirror, yeah.
um, the spectrogram down here again. And here's the word dopamine. And now instead of using the International Phonetic Alphabet, because sometimes it's a pain to try to find the right International Phonetic Alphabet sound and use it, we're using a different type of transcription. I think we decided on ARPABET. There's lots of different ways to write out speech sounds. So we have D, O, P, M, E, and N. And then we had the beatboxing sounds. Here's the closed hi-hat. I'm going to make that a lowercase because that's how I prefer it. Capital B for a kick drum, and here's the uppercase snare again.
Okay. So yeah, she cuts off the vowel.
That's right. So the E vowel is about this long. Can you hear this?
Oh my God, that's how long it is? And yeah, I can hear it.
Yeah, that's how long it is. So here's the whole thing.
It's so, you do hear the E, but when you play the E in isolation, you can't, it's almost like, yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. When you play just this little bit,
that makes no sense on in isolation. I would never like.
It's hard. But it sounds like more like an I here or something. But when you play it in the whole, like when you play the whole thing, you can sort of hear is that it, but you also, it's easier to recognize it as the intended sound E for dopamine. Or maybe it's a reduced version of that sound.
Right.
This how we perceive things, basically, like the context helps a lot.
Yeah.
Here's the case snare. It's very long. But so your point about all this is a good one. And so the paper and the abstract sort of hints at this, but it's not exactly clear unless you go through what we mean that we start focusing on these kinds of cases where the closed hi-hat replaces a duh, and the kick drum replaces a puh. And we focus on those one-for-one sound replacements where beatboxing sound replaces, and it always ends up being a consonant. And then later at the end of the paper, we come back and say, but that's not all. There's also these cases, like in the word dopamine, where the case snare comes in and just like totally, partially covers this vowel. What do we do with that? Or there's another one, it's the word sky later on, where the ah in sky gets cut like into two parts, basically. Let's see if I can find that here. This is called Praat, P-R-A-A-T, and we could like do a whole thing on it and how to analyze it. But this is a way to like, if you record yourself beatboxing, you can upload you can put the audio in into Praat here or Audacity or other tools, and you can do your own segmentations and pick out where are the beatboxing sounds, how long are they, and you can start to get like technical acoustic information about them. How loud were they? How long was the closure portion where everything was quiet? How long was the burst portion? And that can tell you some interesting information. Here's Sky. Sky I. This is once again, this is
so this is this goes back to the challenge of to get a really good case snare and to get in percussion in general. Like this kind of percussion and singing, they actually really don't get along. Like
it's hard.
It's
hard.
really quite challenging. Yeah, to get your like this is why I think a lot of beatboxers sing quite lightly. Because if you have a lot of vocal mass, and this is where we're getting into maybe phonetics, which is
great.
Yeah, I like talk to me about that a little bit, because I know that if I try to, like, my false folds will end up contracting, and I just feel tense if I like, even if I try to sing operatically and do a like, Pavarotti famously just like skipped consonants. Like,
Right.
you go for a high note, he's like, yeah, no, I'm not singing that P. Like,
There's no point. I, so I think my first thought on this is that I've learned to never assume for a beatboxer that something is impossible or
yeah, they're
very
kind of
hard.
animals. Yeah. I
Beatboxers
just,
doing like it's incredible. I am consistently blown away by the new sounds that I hear. And even like just like really solid, not that innovative beatboxing is still vocally impressive gymnastics.
oh yeah.
But eventually, if you like just like getting your beatboxing basics, eventually if you practice long and hard enough at something that you want, you can probably figure out a way to get it to work. So I bet over time, like give it another 10 or 20 years, well, no, beatboxing goes really fast.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So give it another like 1 or 2 months. And somebody might be inspired to be like, you know what, I'm gonna do some like nice vibrato. I'm gonna have like a really operatic style of singing, and then I'm also gonna throw in all of my beatboxing sounds, including inward sounds. And to flip back and forth, so when you're singing, you're typically breathing outward, pulmonic, egressive breath, pulmonic from the lungs, egressive going out of the body. When you do an inward case there, it's a textbook pulmonic ingressive sound. The air is still going into the lungs, but it's coming into the mouth this time. To flip back and forth between outward and inward breath is really, really hard. But that's why we have like inward drag and stuff. Like there's a lot of things that beatboxers already know how to do to make those kinds of switches. It's much easier in beat rhyming, I would guess, to hold on to an outward breath rather than trying to flip back and forth between outward and inward. Um, and so maybe singing sky like this. Wait, oh, here,
And
we're
then,
playing.
yeah,
Sky,
and the glottal is on time. Yeah.
Maybe, right. So maybe that's actually not so hard. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't do it right now, but like maybe it's in the grand scheme of things not so hard, just because it's all can be done on one relatively fluid breath. Um, you could escalate that by trying to do it inward. You could escalate that by requiring the larynx to be doing something else for the vibrato while you're also trying to then get your case snare to be exactly right. And if it's inward, that creates a whole other set of problems. Some people's case snares are also ejectives, like the vocal folds have to close and lift up in order to get the initial punch of the case snare before all the breath work happens. So maybe it means adapting your case snare that you don't have to do that so you can do the vibrato more easily.
Yeah, you can almost do like an echlaut or nachlaut. Like, I don't know. It would be probably not
It,
at all. I don't know, but
I
someone would probably make it work, but not me.
I also don't know. But like, I
Uh,
guess what I'm saying is like you can compromise maybe the clarity of your case snare in order to deal with the other stuff that you want to do in your musical performance. And but that's kind of the point of the whole paper is compromise. At a
mm,
certain point, if you're trying to do two different things, like two things that are just really they're just different. Talking and beatboxing are different things. They have different goals, they have different structures, they're different things pretty much all the time, except when you're beat rhyming. But when you're beat rhyming, there's compromise in how you keep some elements of your talking and keep some elements of your beatboxing. And so one of the ways that you keep your beatboxing is focusing on the rhythm, making sure that you're actually getting your rhythm right. Um, bare minimum, just like, I don't know, laying down a snare on your twos and fours.
yeah.
Um, but and everything else can be kind of wishy-washy maybe. But so maybe the beatboxing won't necessarily be as like if you just were to look at the beatboxing on its own, it might not be so musically intricate because the beatboxing sounds are trying to align themselves with speech sounds instead, so you can get good sounding lyrics. So there's a compromise there between the beatboxing complexity and the achievement of the lyrics. And that same kind of compromise might be what you find if you were trying to do it operatically, or if you're going to throw in some overtone singing, or if you're going to, I don't know what.
Like if do a bass sound. I mean, even the some of the vocalized bass sounds like
right.
Whatever, the crazy shit that people do. Like it's. I mean, I tried to do the click roll today.
Oh, uh-huh.
Ain't happening to me. Not for a while.
What was I've been working on my the lingual egressive sounds. All the ones where the back of your tongue pushes the air forward past your tongue tip or your lips or something. I can't do it. Wait. I can do them lingual aggressive outward, but I can never get them coming back in.
Yeah, I can't do inward bass for my life. Yeah, that's so counterintuitive to me.
And this is why I love beatboxers. They're so good at doing all these things.
Yeah.
And that I am not. I wanted to show. We could talk about this all day, and I wanted to do the abstract just to like present the whole story, and then I am happy to go like zipping around as we have been. But I wanted to just sort of show what the key bit of the science looked like in the end. So this is a table. And this table is the foundation for like the main finding of the paper. And it's a table where I just counted stuff. So I went into Prot where we did all those annotations, and I counted how many times beatboxing sound that was a labial sound with the lips, so in this case a kick drum or a PF snare, how many times they replaced a speech labial sound. That could be a p, a b, a f, or a v in these cases, because we're singing in English. And that happened 19 times. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, great. So from there, I also counted how many times did a beatboxing tongue tip sound, in this case a closed hi-hat, replace a speech labial sound, p, b, f, v, and the answer was 0 times. So that's like a big difference there. Like if you are a speech labial sound, a p, a b, a f, or a v, you are much more likely to get replaced by a beatboxing labial sound, a kick drum or a PF snare, than by a closed hi-hat. In Kid Melody's dopamine performance, anyway.
Yeah.
The opposite is true if the intended speech sound, like the one in the lyrics, is a tongue tip sound. T, d, s, z, even sh, zh, those kinds of sounds. Th, the. Those tongue tip sounds only got replaced by a kick drum or a PF snare twice, but they got replaced by the beatboxing tongue tip sound, the closed hi-hat, 21 times. So this is the way of demonstrating this. Like we can have this intuition. And I think all the things that this paper says about beat rhyming are probably intuitive to anybody who has spent more than 30 minutes doing like decent beat rhyming. That, well, yeah, really the key to beat rhyming, at least in this style, is I'm just gonna punch up the consonants of the words that I'm using and make them sound a little bit more beatboxy. And
I think the instant application for this to me is if you write lyrics and you want to combining the art of lyricism and beatboxing. If you want to give particular preference to the lyrics, you might want to problem solve.
Yeah.
And so to use this logic, you can actually problem solve some of the challenges lyrically.
Yes. So you can like sort of take a scientific approach or use the scientific data, but I guess what I'm saying is a lot of beatboxers may already have good intuitions about this. Like if you're trying to arrange your composition, you may perform it to yourself and go, no, that doesn't feel right. And you might work out, oh, it's because I've done this with the relationship between the beatboxing and the speech, or I need to do this with the lyrics or something. Like you can do a lot of that without the scientific stuff. To make it science specifically, we turned it into numbers.
Sure.
And I think that's important for showcase. Not all science has numbers, but when you do have numbers like this to show that you measured something, that you counted something, that you saw how long something was, that you looked at like the size of something, I don't know. We would take measurements about the world. And counting is one type of measurement that we can do. And that is what you were asking before. Like, how do beatboxers get involved with science? And one of the key things is you have to measure something in order to,
Okay.
in most cases, you have to measure something. That's a classic hallmark of science. And so this is an example of the kind of thing that you can measure. You can just count how many times something you're interested in happened. And you might see a pattern show up as a result of that. If you can describe that pattern of the thing that you measured, and you can describe how you measured it, well, you're on your way to doing some pretty good science.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to show this table. This like sort of is the core of the scientific part of the whole thing. And it's not that hard to start counting things or measuring things once you have the tools. If you start like and you have a question about what you want to count. So if there's something you're interested in studying, like I want to know the difference between these two kinds of bases or something, if you can record them and then look at them and then measure some differences between them, then suddenly you're learning something.
Let's take that logic and
Mhm.
apply it to some of the questions. And
Oh, great.
and to discuss, obviously, I think more of the process as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to have the answer. Because
Yeah.
as we said, like coming with the real answer to stuff is very hard at its core, especially without like, the tools. So Vo could have asked, like circular breathing. He had a couple questions about circular breathing. There was another one he had about the statement of inward drags, someone falling unconscious standing up. There's the uvula snort bass, and he's Dilo is not the only person to have injured themselves doing snort bass.
Yeah.
So now, this is probably one of those ones where like don't go hurting yourself for the sake of numbers.
Right. Yes.
But let's say that because so many people put out so much content. Let's say instances where injuries happen
Mhm.
are filmed. And then, there's a lot of snort bases where people are not injured that are filmed.
Mhm.
My instant thought is that you cannot control for the sound system, the recording environment. So that's a major obstacle.
Mhm.
But would there be a process in that to get started on identifying certain patterns?
So as the scientist, my initial questions are, can we count how many times a particular sound has injured a beatboxer? Like if we're focusing on snort bass, if we're focusing on other kinds of sounds, can we identify just like at a baseline, we know it, if we know it happened at least one time, can we try to count how many other times it's happened? Can we do a survey? Can we solicit people's stories? Can we go troll YouTube and just like count the number of times that we did catch it on video? Or alternatively, if we're looking for knowledge about beatboxing injuries, we could start by just asking, how did you get hurt doing beatboxing? And then start counting how many times was it this sound or this sound or this sound? How many times was it not a particular sound at all, but a particular style of practice or something else? And just being able to systematically count the number of times that an injury occurred and to be able to describe the circumstances around it. If we can create a table, if we can create a spreadsheet or something to describe all of that, then that's suddenly the starting data to know where to go from there, to know what kind of other investigation might be needed.
Okay. That might be because that was one of the the last time we did the interview, the biggest question was about health.
Yeah.
And people didn't. I mean, they were frustrated with the I don't know, which is like that's the truth though. So to begin the process, I think like a Google form and getting that around to as many people as possible would be an interesting data point. One thing about sorry, this is vocode again. The thing about snort bass that's weird is most sounds you can basically do as loud as possible and not feel anything vibration bass. Poly you can't push because it's a specific position, whereas snort bass has no limit and can be painful very fast. So that's an interesting, I don't know how to translate that into this process that we're talking about, because that's a very specific sensation, like pushing loudness. There's a lot of mechanics involved, and this would be the phonetics. I guess the part of this would be phonetics, but
Yeah. Well, so this is different actually than some of the conversations or like the conversation that we had about health last time, I think, because now there's a culprit. There's a particular sound
there's a
now that we're
villain.
worried about. I remember in the past when I was just getting started in beatboxing science, I would see questions from people like, "Hey, like, can you get hurt doing beatboxing?" Or like, "Is this style gonna hurt me?" And a lot of the answers were, well, we don't know because we haven't seen how many beatboxers have got hurt yet, and also just like there were a lot of unknowns out there because we didn't have too many culprits. At least I didn't know about them at the
Right,
time.
right.
But if there's now something, and this is me like coming back to beatboxing after having started a new job where I focus not on beatboxing at all. If there are specific culprits, that makes it much easier to start thinking about the scientific questions and ways to, without causing injury, hopefully, figure them out. So like if we can know, so to your point about the phonetics, if we can know the difference between a snort bass and some other similar kind of bass, if we can find somebody maybe who can produce those two sounds, maybe several people who can produce a lot of similar sounds without hurting themselves, uh, then they could be analyzed. We could be an acoustic analysis where we look at just the sounds that are coming out. It could be an articulatory analysis where we actually do some imaging, maybe in an MRI, maybe with an ultrasound or something, to look at what's happening inside the vocal tract. And that can be like refined and pinpointed. If you know where specifically you're looking, you can make the camera have better resolution in that area often. But it starts with understanding, at least to a super like a simple degree, where is this sound produced in the body, and then knowing where to look after that.
And then the I think
Yeah.
what Ryan got at was a kind of a hypothesis approach would be that, could we get an estimate of looking at the physics of what forces created in the mouth and the various parts of anatomy can withstand? I would say that would be, you could probably find a direction, like that's what I said with the uvula is not a very big piece of flesh, but there are a lot of very small pieces of flesh that don't get injured with a lot of force, like and so it's interesting to see that snort bass is such a culprit. So
It sounds like a great dissertation question.
and that's the thing, dissertation. Like that's the problem with all this stuff. I mean, it's what makes these studies of quality is that it's a lot. It's a lot of work. But if people are getting injured, so I wanted to bring it into one of the ways that a lot of distortion singing got funded. Metal singing was in the 2000s. Hardcore, that thing just took on a life of its own, and a lot of these really fantastic artists were getting hurt, and there was a financial incentive to get this stuff studied. Now, vocal distortion is still not as studied as other things, but even if you go further back, even with belting, Estel in the 90s, that was a major step to take belting seriously. So I guess the solution for beatboxers who want to help sign is get famous and very rich. But
or if we're identifying, like if there's questions about health concerns, identify the health problem, and it sounds like we're on that, and then figure out how to get funding from, I'm speculating here, maybe the National Institute of Health has some funding that, like in one of its grants, that could be directed toward beatboxers, specifically addressing the specific health problems that beatboxers may not be facing.
yeah, and not to get political, but I imagine that with this administration, the budget cuts and that might be a difficult stretch, but we'll see. I don't know.
It's all very confusing. I know there
Yes.
was definitely a day earlier this week when I wasn't sure if I was going to continue getting paid to do the work I was hired to do.
Yeah.
So, and it's all in progress.
Yeah. Hold on. Sorry, we saw asked a dentist about the safety of teeth clicks. Not sure if that's the right name. And then conclusion is that Voka says that throat sounds through the nasal are fine, but the creation of breathing sounds is where the root of the problem starts. So that would necessitate to try and bring it into focus of this idea of structuring a study and getting community participation involved.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the idea of like a Google form. How did you get injured? If you got injured, and then maybe it's best to not prompt people for what sounds. Right? Like what are the sounds that you feel uncomfortable with, or versus injured versus whatever? Like that. It's how do you frame that question? Because that in and of itself, like I don't want to bias people and say,
right,
how did you hurt yourself with throat bass?
So if I'm doing this as an academic I'm situated at an academic institution. If I'm going to do a survey like this is a hypothetical. Then the first thing that happens after like coming up with the sample survey questions and running them by like some people I know and trust to get their sense about the bias and how this goes one way or another, we also have to run it through an internal review board, an IRB. Which is a group of people who double check the ethics of an experiment that you want to run or a survey that you want to send out, to make sure that people's identities are getting sufficiently protected, to make sure that people who submit the thing aren't going to like accidentally be harmed or face a repercussion for the work that you're doing, and to make sure that you are going to use like advertising methods to solicit people to participate in your survey or your study that make sure you get a sufficiently diverse group of people so that you know that you're not accidentally generalizing from one small population to a much larger population.
And this is why it takes so much time.
It's why it takes a lot of time. And the internal review boards they usually have a backlog of studies they need to look at. So you can do like some it's a whole long process. But finding somebody at an academic institution to help make the survey, a social scientist, a psychologist, or a psycholinguist, or also somebody in the medical field who works on health issues, because none of the health thing would be my department. Well, I say that it's not my specific like area of expertise.
Right. And that's
but
I'm not trying to put you on the spot to answer.
No, I understand. But what I mean is like you would be looking for somebody who has the expertise to be able to create the appropriate kind of survey that will get the right information to know about the specific parts of the anatomy that they might be looking at, or would have the tools to be able to look at the throat in order to look at these things. And finding that person who has the appropriate degree and has access to an IRB in order to like do the thing ethically takes some time. But if the community can do all of that, then that becomes a very interesting scientific study.
Okay.
Yeah.
Luckily, one of the reasons I've been streaming a lot more on Twitch, but I decided YouTube today because transcripts.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So my favorite thing to do right now is to dump transcripts into ChatGPT, and so like I'll probably ask for this this moment to create
Mhm.
a list, and then I might run it by you just to make sure it gets it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Um,
yeah, so no, this makes me understand and appreciate why it is you want to share these papers because they are labors of love.
well,
I mean, like really though, they are.
that's that's true. That's definitely true. The reason why I want to share papers, like beatboxing science papers, is because I did the work that I did, usually in conjunction with beatboxers, or the work was informed a lot by beatboxers. But the beatboxers I worked with were just one or two people. And there's a whole community out there of beatboxers, and artists in my experience, artists often love science, and the beatboxing community, in terms of its pedagogy and its like artistic development, could maybe benefit from knowing some of the science that was done in conjunction with some beatboxers. Um, I want to make sure that the word is out there in case anybody wants to use it.
I think there's going to be the beauty of this is that I'm not a scientist. I don't, I have my undergrad, but it's a BA,
Mhm.
and I really do. I almost wish they would teach the reading of scientific articles in high school, which might be challenging to get to that level in high school, but it seems like a prerequisite for modern day, almost, to be able to navigate academic literature in some capacity. Um, and that, like, for example, when your paper on beat rhyming, I kept coming back to like, here are some practical applications.
Mhm.
That's always my, like, this is why I studied more Estel, and this is why, like, I always joke, I learned everything that I learned about singing because I'm not talented. Like, I was like, it ain't working out, and I need to know why. So that's my story. And
Mm.
I think that when it comes to beatboxing, there are so many people who are not top tier competitors who've been doing it for 10 years and who feel the way I did about singing towards towards beatboxing. And so like it means a lot to come on here and try to suss out in these articles like immediate practical applications, of which there were many today in one
Oh, great.
article. So, just the idea of you can replace this, here's one, and I could even get into like, here's how this artist uses the glottal, here's what a glottal is, and here's like,
Mhm.
this helps me make an educational video about singing and beatboxing
Yeah.
and lyricism and making it applicable. I couldn't help but notice, because this is something that Vocoda brought up, and that I saw when you were on Google Scholar, that you have another article on the differences between a novice and an expert.
Oh, yes. Uh, can I talk about that right like now?
I mean,
Maybe I can talk about that another time.
sure. I mean, yeah, it's been
Uh,
an hour and a half, so I do this all day. So,
I can tell you that so this was part of the first study that we did, like that the first study that I was part of as a scientist working with and on beatboxing, um, was this MRI data. There's a beatboxer at Nimitz, NIMITZ. She collected this MRI data. She found the beatboxers, and she collected the data and had them figure out what to beatbox. And then I came in afterward and said, "How can I help?" and helped to describe what was happening in the vocal tracts of the beatboxers.
let's bring that up, because you did want to bring this up, and this is the coolest thing on the internet for me. And as you look at my haircut, you can tell I know what cool is. Um, I need a haircut. But it's phenomenal, and I hope whenever I put it in my videos, I make sure that I mention you by name
Oh,
and
great.
the website. Let me
Uh,
get it up, because I bring this thing up all the time. Oh, sorry. Do you have to
well,
go?
while you're doing that, I wanna just say, we looked at five beatboxers. Like there's data from five beatboxers. The website you're pulling up has data from one of those beatboxers. And there are two beatboxers who are who we characterized as novices. They were doing fine beatboxing at the level of like you
Boots and
wouldn't
cats.
probably make it to GBB finals.
Yeah.
Um, but like, still I would say passable beatboxing, especially from my perspective. So we looked at sort of a qualitative, that is, we didn't do so much with numbers about it, but we just sort of looked at what's happening inside the vocal tract for those novices versus for the experts that we saw. And that's what happens in that paper that you were talking about.
Okay.
Um,
And
so
do you explore certain sounds to do that? How do you isolate and
uh,
differentiate
a,
what
a
happens?
lot of beatboxing science is on the fundamentals, your boots and cats.
And boots and cats. Okay.
And so this is on, I think I'd have to look at the paper again, but
Mm.
uh we looked at kick drums and closed hi-hats and case snares and maybe a couple other sounds and just I think you know what? Wait for the next video. We'll talk more about what happened in the next video. You can show the
Gotcha.
MRI stuff now though as like
It's on screen. Yeah.
okay, great. All right.
Yeah. It's
So,
so one of the things that I really wish that we could get like 4K MRI footage so I could speculate on all kinds of things because I'm looking at the vibration based one
yeah.
and I want to know how much contraction of the area epiglottic muscles there are
Yeah.
because
Great question. Great question. The science is getting better. And sorry, here the tools are getting better. And we're beginning to be able to do like real-time 3D stuff. Um, so I mean, it's I do not know currently what the state of the art is and whether the state of the art is enough to be able to get laryngoscope quality videos of what's going on in there via MRI or something.
there is a video that someone posted on YouTube. He went to an ENT and he recorded his beatboxing with the laryngoscope, and there is, I believe, a vibration based sound, and it's wild. It looks like the whole thing contorts into this weird. It's just insane to me.
I remember the video.
Yeah.
So like through that method, you see top down what's going on, but as the different articulators are moving around, the camera is just shining from like one direction down. And so if something like protrudes or moves in one direction, cutting off the view of the camera, it's like sticking your thumb over
Yeah.
the lens of the camera, then you can't see what's happening beneath it. So that you get a really nice and clear and color view of what's happening in the throat that way. But a 3D MRI view or something of what's going on in there would, if the technology is good enough, which I don't happen to know off the top of my head. If it is, I can find out, would give you a sense of what's going on like in all directions without having that kind of occlusion from another piece of tissue. But probably at not as high definition.
Right. I mean, it's when the funding.
It's never perfect.
I know, and I'm just so impatient with this stuff because it's like, because I use this stuff to make up for my deficits, and it's at this day and age, I don't think I would ever. I just know that if I were a kid, I wouldn't have been an opera singer. I would have been a beatboxer. That's what I would have been doing. Because the reason I liked opera is I like being loud and making noises. And what better way to do that than beatbox?
Great way.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to get into anything else? Because it's been an hour and 40.
I wanted
you got a
to.
kid.
I had a little checklist. I wanted to like introduce and show people how to get to that paper in case you want to try reading it on your own. I wanted to give a summary of the very basics of the findings. I wanted to show like what you can it's a literacy perspective. What can you glean from the information around the paper about the paper quality and who was involved and that kind of thing. And I wanted to preview what would come next for the MRI stuff. So I think you've chosen for us. We'll take a look the next time we talk at the novices versus experts paper. Oh, for that, I will just emphasize, the science is slow. And so the videos that we collected were from beatboxers. I think those videos were collected in 2015. Beatboxing has changed a lot in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So there's modern questions that we have that cannot necessarily be addressed by existing scientific data, which for
Is
some
how it
reason
goes. I mean, that's
it,
why, like you said, you always follow the beatboxer. Tink had a question. Let's see. Comes in and out. Oh, so this one I don't know if you would know, Tink. I've never been able to hit my whistle note until I was 23, and then I had I could do it every day afterwards, and then at 27, I had a condition. I had to get my teeth removed. Since then, it's patchy, comes in and out, and I can access it only 50% of the time. And now my MS is acting up, and I have nodules, and I don't know if it's because of MS or because of me trying to reach whistle. My throat always hurts, like I'm being choked. I don't know if anyone could answer that other than an ENT. And then even then, I think the information on whistles are like not that well studied. There's like, I know of 3 papers, but all of them are in the scope tank of how it works and not what the consequences are of whistle. And I imagine that it's just because of it's a very niche technique. I don't know for sure if that's the reason, but I would imagine. And I would need to check again. I'll check Google Scholar for whistle note stuff, and I'll see if I can look into it, Tink. But you would definitely want to go to an ENT. They couldn't. Oh, you visited 2 ENTs. Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer, unfortunately. Just for an idea of how expensive. So the crowdfunded metal coach research raised $300,000 to study 6 people. Just for an idea how expensive vocal research is. Yeah.
science is expensive.
I mean, yeah. Oh, she's wondering your thoughts on that. On the whistle stuff.
I no. I think medical doctor would be better prepared to answer about that. I don't know much about the whistle notes myself, and everything else I think is a medical doctor question.
Yeah.
There are Okay, so I said that, and then I do know of some people who have done research on, say, people who have had glossectomies, so where a portion of the tongue is removed. It's a surgery.
Mhm.
And there is scientific interest in how a person talks after they've had a glossectomy. And I paused there just because like there's a lot of sort of background questions about that. But like, how do you adapt to maybe you had a tip of a tongue before and now it's gone, for example, or the body or the root of your tongue is partially or completely gone. That requires adaptation. And there are scientific studies about how people do that as a way of understanding both like the practical consequences for the human beings who undergo vasectomies, and also there's sort of theoretical, bigger picture scientific questions about how do you know what do you know when you know how to talk? Like, what does it look like to know how to position your vocal tract in some way or another way, and how does that adaptation look, and what does it tell us about the human mind and body? So there's related kinds of research to looking at how people adapt, but not for this. I don't know of any for this specific case.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for the question, Tank. Yeah. The I always try to, and this is maybe a conversation for after the stream, but I figure why not show how the sausage is made. I came to you and I was like, here's this thing that's going on. Here's this controversy in the beatbox community. How can we use the knowledge we have to discuss this? And the answer, I think, that we're getting to is it's not a good fit because the science is not directly it has to be really truly dedicated to the thing.
And you need to have the right person.
Yeah.
And any scientific expert, maybe not any. I will talk about my kind of scientific expert. I know a lot about a really narrow topic. Like I know a really narrow set of things. I know it pretty well. And then when you ask me to step outside of that, I begin to start making things up, and I don't want to do that for anybody.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
actually, I was actually going to segue because this gets me thinking on the nature of your paper with the beat rhyming.
Hmm.
How much have you done when a sound system comes into effect with linguistics? Zero.
Zero.
Okay.
So there's I will say, when we're talking about when we talk about the sound system and the electronics and everything, I would first consider thinking about the people who work or who are members of the Acoustical Society of America. Big organization. They have the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America. It's actually they have a conference a couple times a year. It's the first place I submitted for a poster or presentation about beat rhyming. And they have a lot of stuff going on. I believe there's underwater acoustics and like acoustics for spaces and rooms and things. There's a whole bunch of people who study all different kinds of sound, and many people who are part of that group, for example, might know about amplification and the relationship between
I would imagine we'd have to get two, like you and someone else in a room, and probably someone, a third expert, because like what we're talking about, the example that comes to mind is Gillard was able to shake the room in a way that other contestants were not,
right.
and he won as a result. So that's like a
Right.
big point of conversation.
So you want for that conversation somebody who can talk about beatboxing and how beatboxers make their sounds and like how how Gillard's sounds might be different from some other beatboxers, maybe. You would want to talk have somebody who can talk about the room acoustics and the amplification setup, and who would know like how the room was set up. You'd want an beatboxer in the room to be able to talk about like the effect and like the musicality behind everything and the technique involved. Um, and if you get those three kinds of people, maybe some other kinds of people, that's a fun conversation and can also turn into a scientific paper. But it
Yeah.
takes the right kind of collaboration to be able to uncover some of these details.
And until then, we'll have to trust the GBB judges.
Yeah.
Who I do. Yeah, because those guys are sick. Klops was on the panel this year, and yeah. Okay. I'm super interested in all of this, all of the work that you do. I wish I'll let me think about what you said, and I'll see if I can. It seems like a lot of this is just not just a matter of funding, but also coordinating people, which is one of the more challenging things to do in life. Let's be real.
This is why academics have conferences where they set up places and times to meet and to share their work and discuss the work. And like you need to have like some event or something where people come together in order. That's one of the main catalysts for like cross-fertilization of ideas. It's hard to coordinate those things too,
Yeah.
to your point.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the next thing for I'll just, like one morning I'll wake up and make a beatbox science con.
Well, I think about it every day, every single day.
That's telling to how nerdy we both are. We fantasize about beatbox science con.
I do.
Imagine just an MRI machine right on site where no one dies.
That would be very expensive. We would need to install a whole Faraday cage and we can get an ultrasound machine on site.
That would probably be that's a little bit more budget friendly. All right.
Yeah.
I'll let you go unless you want to listen to some beatboxing together. I'm sure that a lot of people would love any of your insights, but you have a kid, you have a job, you have a wife.
I do. And I need to take care of both of those things.
Yes.
It's been a real pleasure to be here though, and I can't wait to come back.
Absolutely. All right. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
All right, bye.